we're here to talk. The topic of this session is agency. Who has it? When do you want to seed it? And what happens when you literally have your agency embodied in the form of ubiquitous AI agents, an imminent future that may shortly be here. So I have a great lineup here to discuss the implications of this, about really sort of where AI is headed and what it means for brands, experiences, and companies. And so with that, let's get into it here. I want to thank, of course, our partners at Hyland for helping us stage this session. Mike, I want to start with you here in this because obviously, again, here we are talking about AI again here at the festival. Every session has AI in it. But I want to revisit this recent MIT study that made the markets move, which is the idea that 95% of AI pilots at organizations are, let's say, subpar from there. My question for you and Hyland is what are they doing wrong, particularly with regards to their data? Like, how are they not actually succeeding at scaling these pilots, and what will it actually take to achieve this big enterprise success that will justify the trillions and trillions of dollars we're spending on CapEx?
It's a great question, and as always, there are multiple elements at play here: alignment, organizational execution. But I think the biggest challenge is the foundation of data. As we all know, AI needs data in order to drive outcomes, in order to be valuable. And the vast majority, somewhere around 80% of the data inside of a typical company is unstructured. It's not in the CRM system. It's not in the ERP system. It's invoices. It's contracts. It's in emails. It's all over the place. So tapping into that is essential in order to realize the value of AI in these enterprise use cases. And that data lives behind the firewall, right? That's not being ingested in the commercial AI models out there. Now you might say, okay, I can use my commercial AI model internally, but you don't necessarily want everybody to have all of that information. So it's important that it's governed. So the focus that we have at Hyland is across critical industries, usually regulated industries. Think government, insurance, banking, healthcare. How can we help them tap into that unstructured information and realize this idea of ubiquitous enterprise knowledge, right? The institutional knowledge. If we can get to that, I think that goes a long way toward solving many of these problems that folks are having in these pilots.
Yes, I want to come back to that one. One of my favorite quotes by Lou Platt, the former CEO of Hewlett-Packard: if HP knew what HP knows, it would be 3 times more productive. Meaning management simply did not know what was going on in employees' heads, for example. Well, AI might be a solution to this one. I want to come back to that because that's really sort of I think the central theme of this. But first I want to go to Tom and Fiona on this because you guys are not in highly regulated industries, consumer-facing at Wayfair and theme parks at Universal here. I'm curious how this plays out for both of you in terms of like what is the unstructured data that you have on your customers. Fiona, if you could start with this. I'm a former Wayfair customer myself here, so you have some of mine. But
Yes. So thank you first for being a customer. Appreciate that.
Aren't we all?
Oh, thank you. Always love to hear that. But yeah, I think the interesting thing about the study, and I think to your point around using data, leveraging data, I think there is definitely, I think for companies like Wayfair, we've been doing sort of more traditional machine learning, predictive ML for quite some time. So we have some experience in terms of like what data and how important it is and how you collect it, et cetera. But I think the large language models, the generative AI, this new generation, data becomes even more important. And to your point around unstructured data that we maybe didn't really have the ability to really leverage before, now becomes a real thing. And I think the other part of it also is just, if you think about the differentiating capabilities, right? The LLMs are getting better and smarter, et cetera. It's like for companies like us, our data is really that differentiating moat, right? And in order to create even better experiences for our customers, more personalized, et cetera, it's like how do we leverage all that data and the fact that it's a lot of it is unstructured and sort of like you're tapping into that which you could not tap into before. And I think that's a really interesting aspect. And in terms of like ROI, certainly I think in our space, customer service and support has been an area where we've seen some good success, and I think those are also in a way easier because the ROI is quantifiable, right? It's like time saved, customer satisfaction, number of calls contained, et cetera. Marketing use cases are another one where we see both from a text as well as image generation. Those are ones that I think the ROI is easier to take a look at. And then there's some which are a little bit more maybe indirect. Like we think about the customer experiences, personalization, more personalization, and then also we've also launched some sort of more designer type of capabilities, right? So being also able to put forth sort of new experiences for our customers. So it's a little bit harder to say exactly what the ROI is, but it's also where we feel like those are investments that we want to make, because again, the capabilities are allowing us to do things we never could have done before.
Great. And Tom, how does that work for Universal? Because this is the kind of thing where, infrequently as I buy furniture, I'm even less frequently going to epic theme park experiences. So it's not like you have this constant stream of touch points. So how are you leveraging that?
It's connecting what a customer will let you know about their preferences, which we see them every couple of years if they're coming for a destination vacation. We see them every couple of months if they're coming for a regional vacation. But we don't have a retailer or a general retailer like Amazon. We don't have this massive steady stream. But we do have an incredibly structured and steady stream of attraction wait times and menu items and meals served and hotel rooms and things like that. So it's really starting to make those inferences between. It's a vacation sounds like a lot of fun, but it's hard to book with which weekend are you going, how many kids are you bringing, how many rooms do you need, what kind of theme park tickets. And we've started by creating an agent for our guest contact center, and they use that to help people on the phone create better vacations that are more rewarding to them. And then we'll roll that out over time to the team members, and then eventually the guests will just directly interact with it and book their own vacations. So it's tying those two things together, which are very different for us.
Mm-hmm. So Mike, Tom's already getting into discussing agents here. Mike, if you can talk about how this plays out, because the thing that's interesting to me about the unstructured data piece of this and this idea of tacit knowledge in a firm, what HP knows, is the idea that you can literally, using a combination of these data streams and evolving generative AI, like literally create a voice of the firm. Like the organization itself can be embodied. Like for example, I know McKinsey, for example, has Lily as assistant. We're starting to see various consultancies are creating these singular AIs that can assist younger people, et cetera there. How do you see this playing out here in terms of it? Like what happens when there is a central mind of the organization where all that tacit knowledge can be bundled together in various ways and can express itself and can be consulted?
Well, yeah, and I do think to your last comment there, I do think there are two layers, right? There's sort of the enterprise context, right? There's this sort of ubiquitous intelligence. As a person, I think about that as what I know. It's informed by my experiences, what I've learned, what I'm observing. There's the knowledge, and then there's the execution on the knowledge. So I think about those two things separately, and you need the knowledge in order to effectively execute. How do I see it playing out? I see it playing out where companies are increasingly establishing that data foundation. They're eliminating the fragmentation and creating that cohesive body of institutional knowledge, and then identifying high-value use cases with ROI, very important, to go off and leverage that data to go off and drive meaningful outcomes. So I think those are the two pieces that need to fit together, and you can't have one without the other.
Okay. All right. So before we go further here, I want to ask a quick question to the audience. How many of you are familiar with the idea of artificially intelligent agents and what agents do? We've got most hands here. All right. We've caught up to the current discourse. I'm glad to see. Because I do want to get, let's take this and get a little weirder here, because we've talked about, obviously, consumer data, we've talked about unstructured data, having access to consumer data, talking about when firms are creating these voices here, but how does this start to play out as it evolves? So 25 years ago, the journalist Doc Stroles and others talked about this idea, before we had Web 2.0 and ad tech and cookies and all this, that in the future, and by the future they meant like 2005, you would have your own agent, and instead of going shopping on sites looking for, say, a pair of Sambas and seeing what prices are available, I would send my agent out there. Patty Mays at MIT and others worked on this. Firefly, the first music recommendation agent. I would send out an agent to go basically say, I want a pair of Sambas and I want it at this price. Go make me some offers. And other agents at all these various brands and retailers would come back and be like, here's our best offer. It was a completely different model of the web. What happens if this is if the time is nigh for this, where I, as an individual, might have my consumer agent, I might have my internal agent, I might have dozens of agents. We'll see where this goes. But I'd love to unpack this, and I don't know, Tom, if you want to start with this too. Like, what does this mean here? Because you also, you got some theme parks here where I can now interact with the rides. What happens when my agent's hanging out with Harry Potter's agent? Call my agent.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, we'd have to check with Warner if Harry would be allowed to do
Exactly,
that.
yes.
We represent multiple brands. There's brands we own and brands we partner with. And you got to decide, you mentioned the voice of the company. Is the voice of the company specific, or for us, is it a character? And do you want a different character, and is that iconic or not iconic? But I think that I would commission an agent to say, find me the best vacation for me and my family. And am I traveling with my adult kids? Am I traveling with young kids? And my agent would talk to dozens, hundreds, thousands of entertainment companies, hotels, airlines, and could compose that. And I think that what'll happen, instead of me watching a Delta ad or a Marriott ad or a Universal Orlando ad, my agent would be querying and saying, do you have the kind of food he likes? Do you have the kind of experiences he likes? Do you have the kind of things that the people he's going to bring like? And instead of the agent that we're working on right now composes packages of an inventory of room nights and attraction tickets and things like that, I would hope that I could have one, a unit of one, an audience of one where my agent and all of the different agents representing the different companies would be able to get me something that's completely unique for me and my travel party. So I'm looking forward to that as a consumer. As a business, holy heck, you got 1,000 of these things banging at you all day, all night, trillions of ad impressions. Like how does a company pay for all those Adidas ads that you just had put out there? So it's gonna be very interesting to figure out how that works from the company side.
Yeah, it's interesting in that regard. I was just chatting with a friend here at the festival. I was thinking about who works in communications, and so we talk about SEO with LLMs. What happens when people are asking questions to AI right now, and you don't know what the responses are? Well, with agents, you're going to know everything that's happening, as they're going to be pounding down your door. Well, Fiona, how does it play out for you? Because when I bought my kitchen table, I was like, where do I get a nice modern kitchen table? And the brand Aura there, I'm like, I'll go to Wayfair and get it. What happens when I'm now sending out, asking for I want a really sleek kitchen table, who's going to offer me prices? What does that mean for brand resonance and for retailing?
Yeah, no, I think, as you mentioned, I think it's both. You need to make sure that you're showing up really well on the sort of the AI platforms, as you will, right? So you talked about SEO, whether it's now AI, EOG, or whatever it's called. And so it's making sure that sort of our components, our agents are also going to be able to provide the right information, right? So it should go beyond, right now I think it's still fairly nascent, so you have the agents that are crawling your site. So for now, you got to make sure that your site is crawlable by the good bots, right? The good agents. But then, over time, very quickly, I think you'll be more granular so that I can actually give you all the really relevant information about the product I'm trying to sell, right? Because at the end of the day, I want to make sure that you get your best table, and hopefully it's a table that I have. So how do I make sure that I play really well in that place so that I can provide all the information so that the agents, the shopping agents, can make their best decision, right? And then I think for brands, it's also on our own property. How do I make sure that I'm leveraging these capabilities to create an experience that is going to be that much more differentiated, so that if you feel like, you're going to have to meet customers where they're at. There's going to be a customer who kind of goes and says, hey, look, I've got $800 to spend. I like real wood. Find me a table. I need to seat 6 people, and just make sure it gets delivered, right? And then there's going to be another customer who's going to really actually want to experience different styles and immerse themselves in the whole discovery process. And I want to make sure that we provide that for the brand, right? So I think I think for brands, really, you do need to lean in, I think, on both sides of the equation to be successful. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it.
Can I just
Jump
add
in,
one other thing here, because I think it's important, and again, I'm coming from a slightly more enterprise as opposed to consumer perspective, but I think as we imagine the future world with agents, an important criteria has got to be risk and trust.
Yep.
And for some decisions, that's not really that important. There are others where that is much more important, and the role of people is going to, I think, become even more important. As we move toward greater automation, like we're all talking about here, we cannot abdicate accountability. People will need to be involved, and these agents will all need to be auditable, observable.
Yep.
There'll need to be transparency. So that as these decisions are made, as the agent is, whether it's choosing my vacation or deciding whether or not I get my insurance payment, that needs to be transparent. So I think that will be a key element of what we will need to figure out in the very near term.
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because I do want to delve into this, because it's interesting to me. Number one, it's interesting when I think about AI. There's a lot of cautionary tales in literature about automatons and machines that are sometimes allowed to run amok. My favorite that relates to agents is The Sorcerer's Apprentice, which we all know from Mickey Mouse and Fantasia here, where you give it some instructions and it scales up and things get out of hand. And I'm curious if the worst thing that can happen today with LLMs is hallucinations, where we're never quite sure what we're getting, and if we can trust it. What are the pitfalls of agents? If we give too much agency to our agents and they go out there and do this, what happens then? And I'll start with Tom on this one, because we were chatting about this backstage, where I think Robert Scoble, the technologist, was talking about some of this, about like, where does the limit between me and my agent end, and where does that accountability start to fall?
He mentioned in this newsletter that his agents may want to learn things on his behalf, and they'll just go execute subscriptions to periodicals or media or something. I think we have a great model for this. I have staff that works for me, and I empower that staff to make decisions. Then they have software, or they have hardware, or they have processes, and it's all ultimately my responsibility. And I think agents that work for me or somebody that I work with, it's all their responsibility. I would like to have IT security look at it like we do on many of our applications today. I would like to have agent resources like human resources have a view into it. Make sure that if I'm a finance guy, I don't say, hey, put all the pennies into my Bank of America account, whatever. Mm-hmm. So I think that it needs to be auditable and transparent. But I think you're ultimately responsible for anything that you send out in the world. Your kids, your employees, your whatever, your agents.
Well, that's great, because I say another piece of computer trivia, which I love. You may have seen it. There's a slide from a 1979 IBM training manual, which says in Courier, in all caps, a computer can never make a computer, I forget, now I'm mungling it, but it's effectively, a computer can never be held accountable, so a computer must never make a decision. In that regard, that accountability and decision has to remain in human hands. And Mike, you're nodding first on this. How do you think that'll play out inside of orgs? Like, where does that land? And then I'll come back to Fiona.
I mean, the truth is that observability and transparency are sort of on the back end. What we need to ensure is that we have guidelines.
Yes.
So I'll give you a very concrete example. We showcased this just a few weeks ago. Unemployment claims. When you apply for unemployment, you submit a whole bunch of information. Your pay stub, your letter of separation, your W-2, all of that. That goes, and some claims administrator today will generally review that and decide what you're eligible for. Great case for an agentic workflow, because there are actually a lot of things that happen here. There's making sure you have all your documentation. There's checking on the eligibility. What benefits are you able to achieve? There's fraud detection. So we demonstrated an example where somebody applied for unemployment insurance, and they had logged in from a different state at some point previously. They'd abandoned a claim request previously, and one of their company work history didn't match. And the guideline said, those are a category of issues, the guideline said, if you have 3 of those, you've got to bring a person into the conversation. You've got to bring this to the administrator. And what the agent did is it said, well, they logged in from a different state, but their mother actually lives there, and he's known to visit there. Mm-hmm. Their previous claim coincides with when they got a job. Their mismatched company was IBM versus International Business Machines. The agent then said, these are all explainable, but benefits administrator, human in the loop, you've got to make the decision. So I think setting up those guidelines up front and ensuring that all of that is transparent on the back, that's the key.
That's a very interesting example, because that points to, I think, the possibility for agents in this yes, those mismatches, those database fields, those things that need human attention. Can you automate that with something that has maybe not quite judgment, but something that can elucidate that? Is really fascinating.
And you might say the agent should have figured that out.
Yeah.
And the agent did suggest it, but it's still worth having a human look at.
Yeah, well, Fiona, as the resident CTO on our panel, like, how do you imagine the CTO's role changing in this? What kind of capabilities you need to put in place, and other procedures, et cetera? Mm-hmm. How are you planning to address this?
Yeah, so I think certainly the guardrails part that you mentioned is definitely something that we tell. So for example, we have developers, we definitely encourage them to use coding assistants of their choosing. So we've got a few that they can choose from. But I think that the important thing is that the amount of time that you take to actually sit down and actually provide the guardrails and instructions to the code generation, actually you get kind of spades back. I mean, like a lot more good output from it. So there's certainly that around like kind of teaching them from a process standpoint. And then the other is that you are accountable for the code that is generated, right? So I think that was, if there was any, I think one of the incidents we had, and the person's like, oh, well, the SQL is generated. I'm like, well, it doesn't matter, right? If you checked it in, you're still accountable. So to your point around like who's responsible, we are, but we're also accountable, right? And I think that's the part that I think we need to still make sure that, like for me, my developers understand and embrace that part of it. But yeah, it's definitely left unchecked, right? Because again, these are autonomous things that can generate copious amounts of code, right? So it's actually, if you don't put some of the work up front, you're going to be trying to clean up a lot at the back. So certainly it's something that we're very cognizant of as we move forwards.
Well, speaking of guardrails, I'm curious what this means in a world for personal data, because obviously the world that we got from Web 2.0 is a world where you have the stacks, the handful of large social media companies and search companies that have accumulated all this information about us. You have very large private data brokers which have built these whole models of us there, and so all this. In an agentic world where I have my own agent that's my own representative out there, how can I possibly control my own data in that regard? Is there a different model here for personal data management in addition to the firm as well too? Or like, how do we think about federated models of like, what data do I make accessible to which parties, or my agent is allowed to access this? I'm curious if we started thinking about what's going to emerge out of this. There's been so many proposals by MIT, Sandy, Pentland, and others that we should own our own data, or there should be data trusts for people. I wonder if these ideas will come back on the table beyond just simply like grab everything you can from cookies, et cetera there. I don't know, Tom, you want to take this one too? Like, what does it mean for people coming to the park? Like, when would I make my data available to you? How much do you need?
I hope that individuals and travel parties can manage what they make available to different groups at different times. So I don't particularly need your HIPAA data or your credit card data unless you're booking, or if you're making a restaurant recommendation. And if you chose to say, I'm allergic to something, then that would be great. I wouldn't want to use that in any other instance. So I think that the same with these guardrails.
Yeah.
I should be allowed to say, my health agent, when it's talking to my menu agent, can say about these allergies, but it shouldn't say that to anybody else publicly. So I'm hoping that these agents can orchestrate and that companies responsibly consume and say, look, I need to know what you're allergic to because I'm making a menu recommendation, but I don't need to know that when I'm booking your hotel room or whatever. So I hope that what comes with the agents is a set of, like your business agent, or if you're a movie star, your agent would release information that was needed to execute the transaction, but not everything else personal.
Yeah. And when it's beneficial for you, right? So I think it's similar. Like if you're willing to share, say, your style preferences and your budget and how you think about, say, your home goods, it'll help me sort of shrink the catalog and come back with items that most resonate with you. And so I think also allowing the customer to know how the data is going to be used, and they see the benefit of it, I think that's where you have this symbiotic kind of relationship, right? And so there's the, they're okay about sharing their data. But I think to your point, though, I think as agents, it becomes more of a thing. I think having controls and guardrails on how do we set it up such that, okay, it should never be used for anything other than helping you find the perfect items for your home. So
I've just recently been talking about a great example. I mean, essentially we're talking about data governance. Yeah. Whether it's enterprise-wide data governance or whether it's Greg's data governance, there has to be means to control that.
Yep.
Well, that's a good question, because I want to ask you this. So I think there's an interesting example that sits at the confluence of these two things. So a few years ago, an engineering firm, Thornton Tomasetti, their steel expert on metallurgy and welding for huge building structures, was retiring. And so as an experiment, they took 30 years of his emails and presentations for the firm data owned by the firm contractually, and built a chatbot of him. They called it Mike 2.0, and he could back test it. It was like Westworld, so you could check fidelity of it. And it was 94% correct most of the time on the questions that he gave to it, that he answered himself. And then Mike tragically died at a relatively early age, and the firm still has Mike 2.0, the chatbot. which I believe they're still using. And I mean, under legal guidelines, they have that data in there. But I am curious how you think this might evolve in terms of like, how will firms start to think about, yeah, like, will I own my own digital twins? Will it be something that we license under sort of traditional terms and service agreements? Will I be signing over data to various people to make it useful? How do you think organizations might change when they are increasingly composed of digital employees as much as they are flesh and blood ones?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of responsibility, ethical responsibility that will be placed upon organizations to figure this out. And I think that those that win with consumers, those that win in the B2B space, will demonstrate transparency and responsibility in doing so. Because I think the risk is that the market rejects that. When it's not used ethically, but there is a lot to figure out there.
Yeah. Well, Fiona, I would come back. You touched upon this a little bit earlier, but how do you think agentic workflows will work with the broader supply chains into this? Because obviously the data crosses so many firm barriers, and as a retailer, all the brands on your platform, all the data you would love from them, all of course is proprietary to them and their comparative advantage. How do you think those relationships will be brokered in real time by potentially all these agents?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're learning as we go, and I think what we said around governance and how the data could be used as an advantage. I mean, we were talking to these different entities before, mostly through APIs, et cetera. So it's not as though we've never had integrations, but I think the part that's going to be interesting now, I think, with agents is the reasoning capabilities now, right? And I think for it to be able to sometimes take actions that are not as deterministic, I think that's the part that's going to be that's added layer of complexity that we need to account for. And actually, along those lines too, right? You don't need everything to be done deterministic and agentic, right? There's some things which are still better well left alone as a very deterministic software program. And I think that's the part sometimes I think as companies are getting into it is also realizing, when can you leverage the reasoning capabilities, the understanding and sort of the actions that agents can take versus other times when it's like, a simple kind of automation would probably suffice and you know what it's going to do, you know what the results are going to be every time. So I would also say that's the other thing I would say would be good for us to just remember and have the right balance, I think.
That's a really great point, this idea. We won't go from 0 to 100. Right, there will be this hybrid transition, and frankly, we're already seeing that. Right, there are structured business processes that have decision points in them that are deterministic. They have decision points in them where people are making decisions, and we're already seeing that where those people are making decisions, that's when agents are being invoked, or a mesh of agents if it's a sophisticated activity, in order to help accelerate that.
100%.
All right, well, we're nearly out of time, but I do want to ask a quick lightning round for each of you. Given all the possibilities we discussed here, again, this is all very incipient here, but we can see it coming down the pike. What is the biggest change organizations need to make to understand this? Because this is a significant disruption to processes, enterprise software as we know it, very deterministic stuff where everything can get a little freeform really fast. I'll come down the line. I'll start with Fiona because she's nodding, so I know she's thought about this.
Yeah, I have thought about it. I think there's a really big change management across the company, and I think that this technology is because it's so ubiquitous and so approachable, it's not confined to your technology organization or your IT organization. It's really how your entire company thinks about, understands, leverages, does not fear, but also uses it and is able to do so. So it's everything from making sure the tools are available, making sure training is available, kind of celebrating how you use it. I think those are the things that we need to do. And like I said, I think it's a kind of a large change management process that we need to embark on.
Great, thank you. Tom.
I think the headline is trust but verify. Trust that this is a good thing. Hopefully employees trust that this is not trying to replace them. Maybe the business doubles because you can respond to more customers faster. Trust that you have a way to audit these new tools. Trust that people are going to use them in the right way, but verify that they're not rounding out the invoices to their own bank account. So I'd say the headline is trust but verify.
I would say AI is one of these technology waves, like the personal computer or the steam engine or the internet itself, and we need to embrace a culture of curiosity as we approach this. I think that the winners here, those that are most successful, will do that. They'll empower their employees. And I think there's also a fundamental rethinking of how we are organized as companies, how we execute our processes. All of that lies ahead of us, and I think open-mindedness will be key.
Well, that's great. Well, I know open-mindedness will be key, because when I start to grapple with the potential and the crazy possibilities that are opened up of the incredible number of touch points and interactions there, the mind starts to reel. So yes, I think being ready to embrace this future is going to be the key skill for anybody in any org. So, all right, with that, can I get a round of applause for our panelists, for Fiona, for Tom, for Mike.
For Greg.
Thank you again to Hyland.